and welcome to the Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. And today we are discussing the topic of Nadhim Zahawi, the former vaccines minister under the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson during the COVID era. Also, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, in charge of the entire British economy for 3 months, just before Boris Johnson resigned as Prime Minister. That Nadhim Zahawi makes a rather spectacularly unexpected return to the front lines by defecting, as you can see from that political satire that was just on your screens, defecting from the Conservative Party to the Reform Party under Nigel Farage. That is the topic for today's stream. We're going to break that news down, dissect it. Many people are even unhappy on the anti-COVID mandate side of the debate at this news because, of course, Zahawi was the vaccines minister when these so-called vaccines were rolled out. So we're going to break this all down for you, provide Radical Media's perspective on all of this, and also suggest perhaps that Farage and the Reform Party be given the chance to do what they said they were going to do, and that is indeed become government. When they are in the party of government, that is the time we put to everybody that you judge them for their track record, not while they're still campaigning to become the party of government. The harms done by the vaccines cannot be undone when not in government. And one only needs to see the record of President Trump in the United States of America by appointing Kennedy in the position of his health secretary and see Kennedy's restriction recently of the number of vaccines that American children have been forced up until this point, babies have been forced to take, to see the direction of travel or the trajectory when it comes to such matters. And that word trajectory is a word we used last week when similar black pillars were criticizing President Trump for his intervention in Venezuela, which was in fact a de-escalation from the precipice of World War III. It's the trajectory that matters, and that the black pillars, the doom mongers, so often overlook when criticizing moments such as this, where the former vaccines minister effectively surrenders the thing that should have been his claim to fame by joining the party of the one man, the leader of that party, Nigel Farage, who has been unequivocal on mainstream media about the deaths being caused by these so-called vaccines. There isn't any other party leader that has been unequivocal in that way. So with all that in mind, we are asking everybody to take stock and maintain some perspective when it comes to this question of whether or not the Reform Party should or should not have allowed for the very senior former Conservative member to defect from Boris Johnson's Conservative Party, former vaccines minister, indeed former Chancellor of the Exchequer, whether Farage should have allowed him to join the Reform Party. That is the debate. Stay with us. That's all coming up here. Will be broken down for you on the Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. We're back just after this.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
Welcome back to the Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. Today's topic, as you just heard in the introduction, concerns this man. He is the former Chancellor of the Exchequer to the United Kingdom. In other words, formerly in charge of the British economy under Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's also, prior to taking on that role, the former vaccines minister who rolled out the vaccines in Britain during the COVID mandates period. He has defected from the Conservatives to join Nigel Farage's Reform Party. We figured our audience would be particularly interested in our reaction to these developments, considering we lost our mainstream corporate media platform on LBC for opposing every single COVID mandate. And so here it is. This is the stream to provide you our reaction. All right, let's first bring you exactly what's happened. As you can should be able to see on your screens, very shortly. The political cartoon we've selected today is a satire, as is our wont. We usually begin with our political satire. This satirizes Nadhim Zahawi as the former vaccines minister joining the Reform Party with an image that is a commentary on the recent Grok scandals. You can see there on the top left corner of the image, that is somebody, the artist, making sure you can see that this is indeed a commentary on the Grok scandal. What is the Grok scandal? That was near Starmer, near Miss Starmer, Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer promising to ban Twitter in the or threatening to ban Twitter in the UK because Twitter's AI program Grok was allowing prompts to make unsolicited nudes of people without their consent. The British government under Starmer reacted by threatening to ban Twitter, and as Elon Musk restricted Grok's ability to do that in public. Grok has now put such powers behind their paywall, making it a pay-per-view service to strip people of their clothing using AI digital technology without their consent. Never mind, we're not here to debate that. This image is a commentary on that scandal by, of course, depicting Nadhim Zahawi with no clothes on, apart from covering his intimate parts with the Reform ribbon, a commentary on, one suspects, the emperor with no clothes. Quite clever. However, showing you this image aside, we are going to, there's the headline for today's stream, PM Johnson's former vaccines minister Nadhim Zahawi defects to Farage's Reform Party. We are going to contextualize what's just happened here and suggest to everybody that, yes, you're right to be skeptical and you should remain skeptical and continue to push on the topic of the vaccines. Nevertheless, this is actually a step in the right direction because we are in the business of making change. We are not in the business of whinging like toddlers. And when it comes to the business of making change, take it from somebody who lost his job opposing every single COVID mandates after boycotting the booster shot live on air. When you're in the business of making change, you need to be able to give people a chance to change. And if the former vaccines minister has joined the party under which the only national leader for a national party that also happens to be in the number one spot if there were a general election tomorrow, if the former vaccines minister has joined the party of the only national leader to link these so-called vaccines to excess death on national media, that's progress, folks. Why stare or look at a gift horse in the mouth? That's progress, and you don't reject progress when it makes itself apparent. You adjust accordingly, and instead, without closing your eyes, give people a chance to change so that the debate can move on. We're going to demonstrate for you over the course of this stream that logic by showing you video of Farage on national television as leader of Reform, linking the vaccines to death. So those who are complaining on the anti-COVID mandate side of the Reform base should understand one thing before we continue, and it's the same that applies with President Trump in the UK. Nadhim Zahawi, the former vaccines minister, has just joined the Reform Party. The Reform Party under Nigel Farage has not joined Nadhim Zahawi, the former vaccines minister. That's a statement of the obvious, but what does it mean? What it means is that Farage is the boss. And if the boss has said and linked vaccines to excess death, then that is what the boss is thinking, not what Nadhim Zahawi is thinking. And we'll break all this down for you so that assuring people, of course, that the panic among certain factions of the online right is, as always, a manufactured panic, because since the advanced UK stroke Ben Habib stroke Rupert Lowe, and I even forgot his name because he only appeared on the scene a year ago. Anyway, Rupert Lowe, Ben Habib, Tommy Robinson, and Elon Musk, who was funding them, began to attempt to undermine both President Trump in the United States of America and Nigel Farage here in the UK. And they did so at the same time in a coordinated fashion, just as COVID mandates were coordinated, mind you, right? Since then, there has been a ever-growing fifth column faction among the online right who are bent on doing everything possible to undermine Nigel Farage's leadership. Now, as, again, somebody that lost their professional career, not just a job, and family's only source of income for opposing every single COVID mandates, including mask mandates, including on a British Airways flight to Tennessee, for which the chief of staff of the governor of Tennessee came to meet me at our hotel lobby to hear about. As somebody, in other words, who lived it as he was happening, we believe it's important for everybody to take our point. When we say to you, this is how you make change, it's in the following way, which we're going to demonstrate Farage is also doing. And that is speaking up when it matters, not when it's a virtue signal. It mattered when they banned face masks to speak up then, when they banned face masks. At that time, as a very much annoyed wife will tell you, we refused in airports and on official British Airways flights to wear a face mask, and then posted a photograph of us doing so, right? Why are we reminding you of that? Because it matters to oppose these things at the time it matters to oppose them, not in 2026, 6 years later, because you've been speaking about it for the last year or two, Rupert Lowe. It matters to oppose these things when they were happening, as Farage went on GB News to oppose the fact that vaccines were connected in research published and spoken about on air, mind you, by Dr. Asim Malhotra, a leading UK cardiologist and public commentator on medical health issues. It matters, as Farage did, to speak against this stuff as and when that research was being published on national television. And so now that it's clear who spoke out at the time that this stuff was becoming clear, it matters less to speak about it. What matters more is to build coalitions around the platforms that those joining your coalition already know you believe in, because the order of events transpiring in that way means that Nadhim Zahawi is joining Reform. Reform is not joining Nadhim Zahawi. Nadhim Zahawi is joining an organization in the Reform Party that is known nationally for having taken a stance on subjects such as quote unquote vaccine related harms when nobody else was taking that stance. That's what matters. In other words, what matters is your signal, not your noise. Now, not everybody has a signal. Most, in fact, people do not have a signal. Those who, a rare number of individuals who do have a signal also have noise. And the distinction between the two is that they deploy noise when they need to quieten other noise, because only noise quietens out other noise. So no matter what Farage said in this press conference, when faced with a barrage of noise coming from the hostile corporate globalist media, the noise that Farage made in return is akin to noises President Trump makes in return when he needs to shut people up. They are noises. What you should really be paying attention to are the signals, not the noises, because the signals are the stuff that make the difference. And one of the easiest ways to tell the difference between a signal and a noise is a signal is a noise made when nobody else wants you to make it, and you're making it anyway, and then you turn out to be correct, such as Farage's opposition to, his raising of the fact of myocarditis and vaccines linked to harms at the time on GB News, that it was politically costly to do so. That's what matters. That's a signal. Now, of course, signals can also be wrong, but this example we've just provided to you is not clearly a signal from Farage that was wrong. And so what matters is he made it when it wasn't popular to make it. When you're in that position, as Farage is and is on a number of policy topics, not just vaccines, then as a result, you have earned the right to have a broad tent. Why? Because you have demonstrated that you stood when it mattered, and then you've also demonstrated that you're in the business of change and not whinging. And the business of change requires a broad church or a wide tent, a big tent. And so as long as you've got the shoulders to shoulder the burden of the larger tent or the broader church, you can welcome others in. The danger is attempting to shoulder that burden without the broad shoulders. In other words, for example, if Rupert Lowe were to try and build a national movement that was fielding candidates not only in every single council seat for this May, but also every single parliamentary seat, he would very quickly discover the fact that he's got very, very small shoulders. And so that no matter who joined him, the weight of any national figure to join the hitherto unknown Rupert Lowe and say even Ben Habib would crush them under the weight of their national brand. The difference here is that Farage's shoulders have been being built for decades. He is known as Mr. Brexit. He is known as a number of things so that when others who are only just waking up to the fact that Nigel Farage's Reform Party is unstoppable in the polls, when they are realizing this and defecting, and this will not be, it certainly wasn't the first and it will not be the last in the form of the former Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi, when they defect and jump ship, regardless of their intentions, if the shoulders are broad enough, then they can build a big enough tent and shelter these defectors from the rain in that big tent, without necessarily forgetting what they used to say and believe, but remaining merciful. Because, of course, people can change. And not forgetting ourselves. And that is why on earth were we even opposed to vaccine mandates in the first place. The reason is because we believed in humanity and life over death. And so with that spirit in mind, it's important to give a chance to people to prove that they also have chosen life over death. But that's not what the black pillars want you to do. The black pill meaning, as opposed to the red pill in the Matrix movies, the black pill is this incessant desire to paint and portray everything as depressing and wrong, and the world will never change, and only evil people are powerful enough to influence change, and therefore there's no point even trying. And in the end, the abyss that Nietzsche so often spoke about. Be warned, if you stare into the jaws of the beast, you become the beast yourself, or indeed lose yourself in that abyss. Nietzsche, no surprise, killed himself. One black pillar reached out to us online recently and even suggested that Jesus Christ in the Bible would have criticized, say, even, for example, President Trump as by now evidently the Antichrist. And again, all we said to that black pillar was, yes, Christ is king. May Allah guide you to his complete message. What do we mean by that? Well, last I checked, Jesus Christ, the king, brought light and not darkness, brought hope and not despair, brought love and not fear. So if your shoulders, as his, the king's, Jesus Christ, if your shoulders are big enough, then you can build a big enough tent. And that's the basis for which we're going to proceed in this stream, and to assure everybody that this will not be the last such high-profile defection from the Reform Party, nor, of course, was it the first. So here is the news on your screens now. News of the defecting former Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi. Our immediate reaction to it, you can see breaking: ex-Tory MP and founder of major British polling company YouGov, Nadhim Zahawi defects to Reform Party UK. We've said the writing is on the wall. One by one, you will witness them all jump ship. It is inevitable. Nigel Farage will become Prime Minister, as we said back on the 18th of December 2024, and the shadow knows. Here is, in fact, a post from the Reform Party announcing it themselves. There's an image of Nadhim Zahawi, and the Reform Party has said Britain needs Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. And a quote there from Zahawi saying, at some stage, we all have to look in the mirror and decide what is best for our country. I've served at every level, from councillor to chancellor of the Exchequer, and I'm convinced this is the right move. Britain is in the last chance saloon, and it needs Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. That's something, of course, that we have been arguing anyway for a long time. We are glad that Nadhim Zahawi has finally woken up to smell the coffee. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. Those of you who know that the writing's been on the wall for a long time, and Zahawi joining at this stage will not get to define the course of the Reform Party. He will only succeed in the Reform Party if he accepts that Nigel Farage is his boss. The same with the MAGA phenomenon. It doesn't matter that Trump, over this Venezuela and now Iran standoff, has been seen next to the arch warmongering neocon Senator Lindsey Graham and others. It matters not. Why? Because Trump has built and has earned to be deemed as having built broad enough shoulders that are you that incredulous that President Trump, with everything that has happened to date to bring him to that position that he is now in, doesn't know what you know about Lindsey Graham and how Lindsey Graham did at every opportunity seek to undermine President Trump's return to the front lines? Do you think Farage, therefore, to continue the analogy, doesn't know that Zahawi was vaccines minister? Doesn't know that Zahawi was the Chancellor of the Exchequer under the very economy, the globalist economy that PM Boris Johnson was Prime Minister of? You think he's forgotten all this? You think that Farage, after the decades of doing the work in the wilderness as he has, will be so easily led? Do you think those that are behind Nigel Farage on this agenda are so easily led that we are not aware of the fact of who is joining the Reform Party and what they think and what they currently think? That is the issue to keep in mind when it comes to such matters. And here we have GB News reporting with the report, Britain needs Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. Breaking, former Tory Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi defects to the Reform Party. And we'll just play you this clip because, of course, it's major news here in the UK.
To tell you all, and of course the British people, that Britain needs reform. Britain needs Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. I know this may come as a surprise to my old party and to many Westminster watchers, but it really shouldn't. And it certainly won't come as a shock to the tens of millions of hard-working, patriotic, decent people up and down our wonderful United Kingdom, from the Highlands of Scotland to the bottom of Cornwall, from rural Wales to the beating heart of London. We can all see that our beautiful, ancient, kind, magical island story has reached a dark and dangerous chapter. Things may feel like they're ticking along just fine within a few square miles of where we stand today. I'm here today to tell you all, and of course the British people, that Britain needs reform.
Now, keep in mind, that doesn't sound like a man who is responsible, at least for 3 months, partly responsible for the terrible state of this economy, because he was in charge of the economy under Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Nor does it sound like a man who was in the machine that caused the terrible decay that we currently find ourselves in by shutting the economy down in their ridiculous lockdowns that have proven nothing but disastrous. And at the time, even, they knew that because their own government refused to release the impact assessment, economic harms versus economic gains of those lockdowns, despite the fact that as broadcaster of LBC's regular weekend show, we asked them for, they confirmed to us they had, and then refused to release them. This man was in that machine. And yet when you hear what he just said there, clearly, because of course he has suffered in his own way over tax affairs, a political humiliation of some sort, clearly he's attempting at least to project to you that he's now prepared to recognize that there's a reason this country is in such a mess, and it's to do with what the governments prior to Farage did. And he's casting Farage as the last chance saloon to save that. Now, the reason we dwell on this for a second is keep something in mind. Have you noticed that former Prime Minister Liz Truss similarly began to speak in such tones after leaving government? What do you think is going on, other than there are dedicated patriots in this country and in the United States meeting with these people and expressing to them their ideas and successfully managing to convince them that they need to be on the right side of history? And that's why it's important to understand that whether or not Nadhim Zahawi is sincere or not sincere is impossible to determine. What is possible is whether he's making the right noises. In other words, did he catch the right signal? And what he goes on to do in the government in the future will be, of course, rest on the leadership that the Reform Party provides to him, which is why it's so important that all of you who are COVID mandate critics inside the Reform Party do not retreat nor surrender from your anti-COVID mandate positions while welcoming people like Nadhim in. So he sees you're not anti-him. You are about ideas and positions for the sake of your country. And there is nothing better than that helps somebody change, because where the heart leads, the mind follows. And that's just the fact of life. So don't compromise on your principles, but also don't be nasty and mean or grumpy. It's not too much to ask. Try and stand on your principles and talk to people nicely about why you think you're right. That's all. Carrying on to continue the breaking news. Here is, in his own words, as you see on screen now from the Reform Party post, why Nadhim Zahawi has done what he's done. In his own words, he's addressed on video to everybody. We'll just play this for you as well.
I was born in Baghdad. My memoirs are called The Boy from Baghdad. We came to these shores in 1979. I was 11 years old. We came with nothing other than hope and determination, but also knowing that this nation was the most civilized nation on earth. But my friends, today, Britain is broken, and I'm convinced that Britain needs reform. Nothing works. There is no growth. There is crime on our streets, and there is an avalanche of illegal migration that in anywhere else in the world will be a national emergency. Nigel recognizes it's a national emergency. And I think in many ways, we need to act in the same way as we did in delivering the vaccine program. This room, this table, became my office during the pandemic, and I broadcast to the nation. These curtains behind me became quite famous on social media because I literally had to go on almost nightly just to reassure the nation that we had the team, we had the focus, and that we will deliver. I founded what I think is one of the greatest information businesses in the world, in YouGov. We all have to, at some stage, look in the mirror and decide what's best for our country. And I've gone from Councillor to Chancellor of the Exchequer to make this move, but I'm convinced it's the right move. Why? Because I think Britain is drinking in the last chance saloon, and it really does need Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. And the one thing that I've been impressed by with Nigel is I've seen politicians come and go, and some are motivated and driven by just getting to the seat of power, get to number 10. That is not Nigel. I have seen him operate with world leaders. When he needs to push back, he pushes back, he listens to allies and works with them, and has that gravitas and respect. And I've made my mind up that the team that will deliver for this nation will be the team that Nigel will put together. And that's why I've decided that I'm joining Reform.
Now, obviously, Nadhim Zahawi wants a position in the future Nigel Farage reform administration of the United Kingdom. Obviously. Now, does the viewer think that the people behind the success of Farage, from all the way back in the years when his plane crashed and nobody believed in Brexit, all the way to now, when multiple party formations later, because each one was jeopardized by entryists, does anybody really believe that Nigel Farage doesn't see entryists coming, doesn't know how to deal with them, and, last resort, will even leave his own party when he feels the entryists have grown too strong and take his supporters with him? Does anybody believe a man who left the leadership of UKIP precisely because they tried and turning it into Tommy Robinson's anti-Muslim obsessed party, and then went on to found the Brexit Party, then left the Brexit Party to found the Reform Party for the same reasons, because entryists had already come in and attempted to overtake that party. In other words, 3 party iterations later, does anybody really believe that Nigel Farage doesn't understand how to fend off entryists and even leave his own party and everything is built if they become too strong? Does anybody believe, therefore, that he underestimates or undervalues the importance of distancing oneself from entryists? Think about it. So clearly he sees Zahawi coming. Clearly there's been long discussion behind the scenes to get us to this point. And clearly, as we're making very clear to you now, even if, because we don't never know this, but even if Zahawi's intentions were impure, clearly there are others around the reform apparatus that have their eyes open and are prepared to stand when it matters on such topics. So where does anybody think this is going to go other than Nadhim Zahawi has left the Conservative Party to join the Reform Party and has joined the leadership of Farage. And of course, everybody needs to remain careful about making sure that the party isn't steered in the wrong direction. But this is, don't forget, coming up to election season, and you need to make as much impact as possible on the public consciousness, because what is the aim? Well, again, it is rather strange to us that many forget that Farage's Reform Party is seeking to do what no other party has done in over 100 years, and that is to come up through the middle against those two major parties and totally decimate the Conservative Party. This isn't some primary school track and field beanbag race that we're talking about here. This is decimating the party of the establishment of the United Kingdom, the Conservatives. Of course, it's going to be difficult. Of course, it's going to require speaking to people, senior people in that party who suggest that they would defect. And of course, to look welcoming in such situations is the statesmanly thing to do. Just think back to when President Trump welcomed the new mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, to the White House. And you remember what it looks like to behave in a statesmanlike manner. And if you're asking for Farage to become prime minister of this country, we can assure you, don't be dumb. We can assure you he'll be speaking to leaders that you disagree with as Prime Minister of Britain far more than Nadhim Zahawi. And so if you cannot trust a man to know his own compass when speaking to those that have been misguided and then welcoming them back in, then why on earth would you ever want him to be PM? Of course, Rupert Lowe, we forgot you don't want him to be PM. Could you perhaps suggest anyone you do recommend other than yourself? And if it would be yourself, then please go ahead and build a national apparatus infrastructure to win in every single constituency. The UK's parliamentary system makes it impossible to win without an apparatus operating in every constituency. Americans may not realize that. We don't have a presidential system. That ensures one thing. That system has many weaknesses, by the way, but it has a strength. The strength it ensures is that whichever leader emerges has already had to have convinced each seat up and down the country to elect somebody that would elect them as leader in parliament. In other words, he can't be a raving lunatic that goes out on a limb only listening to himself, because he's got to have had built a coalition across the country already. That is a systemic check against any prime minister acting too individualistically when dealing with foreign affairs. Understand that Farage as prime minister will be dealing with individual leaders far more reprehensible to you than Nadhim Zahawi. And if you want a prime minister, you're going to need to trust him to be able to talk to people you disagree with without that implying somehow that you can no longer trust him, Farage the man himself. To carry on the topic, as you may have figured by now, why is this a shock? Well, again, there is clearly in the past much that Zahawi has said and that Farage has said about Zahawi that would indicate that this was an unexpected move. So on your screens now, ITV Politics reports a few years ago, this is in the press conference, a journalist asking Farage, a few years ago you tweeted, I'm not British born, Mr. Nigel Farage. This is asking Zahawi about Farage in their joint press conference. A few years ago, you tweeted, I'm not British born, Mr. Nigel Farage. I'm as British as you are. Your comments are offensive and racist. I would be frightened to live in a country run by you. This is at the press conference, ITV News posting this, and we're going to show it to you on your screens and then again, give you our response to this, because of course, it's easy to, as we should know by now, for corporate media to frame things in a certain way. We'll provide to you a better perspective in which to frame this. And by the way, unlike the questioner, here is somebody that has actually had to dodge hammer and machete attacks by neo-Nazi racists. And we can assure you that Farage is not a racist, at least by the version of a racist in real life that we've had to fight with hammers and machetes as a teenager in Southend in Essex. The questioner may not necessarily have the privilege of not having ever had to meet a racist to understand what a real racist is. And we hope they never have that privilege. We hope they remain always having that privilege, that they never have to meet a real racist, because it's not a very pleasant thing. And so coming from where we're coming from, we'll explain to you why it is not the case that Farage is a racist. But first, we'll give you Nadhim Zahawi's answer on this topic.
Thank you, Catherine Forster, GB News. Nadhim Zahawi, a few years ago, you tweeted, "I'm not British-born, Mr. Nigel Farage. I am as British as you are. Your comments are offensive and racist. I would be frightened to live in a country run by you. Why the change of heart?" And this was 2015. Oh, quite recent then, thank you. Yeah. Well, just asking about the change of heart. And also on Iran, Mr. Farage, would you support Britain potentially supporting US military involvement in Iran, and also us possibly prescribing the IRGC?
We should have prescribed the IRGC years ago, just as we should have prescribed the Muslim Brotherhood years ago. And I've been saying those things clearly and consistently for many, many years. And I've reiterated them in recent times. I cannot believe the stupidity of Obama, the European Union, the British Foreign Office, and some of your former colleagues who went along in 2015 with this JCPOA deal. It's been a disaster. It's freed up tens of billions of dollars for the Iranians. What have they used it for? They've used it to fund the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. These are massive self-inflicted wounds. And so I've always felt vehemently opposed to this. We went for regime change against Saddam. We went for regime change against Gaddafi. The regime change we've always needed is in Iran, where the wonderful Persian people, with all their amazing talents, have been kept in this theocratic, brutal regime. I very much hope President Trump acts in the next few days. We don't know how many have been killed. It could be perhaps as many as 2,000, I'm told, before coming to this press conference. So would I support military action against the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, on the ground in Iran, so that the good guys can win this revolution? Absolutely, 100%.
Catherine, good on you for digging out a tweet from 11 years ago. But all I would say to you is, if I thought this man sitting next to me was in any way had an issue with people of my color or my background who have come to this country, who have integrated, assimilated, proud of this country, worked hard for this country, paid millions of pounds in taxes in this country, invested in the country, I wouldn't be sitting next to him. And I think he wouldn't be sitting next to me either. Quite.
Now, what that makes clear, we're going to get to his answer on Iran in a moment, but what that makes clear is clearly, again, you see Zahawi is the one who's changed his opinion, not Farage. It's very clear there. It was Zahawi that said he thought Farage was racist. And it's now Zahawi saying he no longer thinks Farage is racist. We can assure you, we've never thought Farage is racist, and Farage is not a racist. The fact that Zahawi is now saying he no longer thinks Farage is a racist is what should matter. Not that he used to say that Farage is a racist, because we are now in 2026, and it's no longer, as he said there in the video, from 2005 or whenever it was. And what matters is what Zahawi and Farage believe 10 years, 15 years later, which is now. And of course, as you see there, and it's not just Zahawi, whether it's the chairman of the Reform Party, Zia Youssef, or their now announced candidate for the mayor of London, Layla Cunningham, clearly all British Muslims who say, obviously, that they don't think Farage is racist. And that is the news here. That's why it pains them so much and why they misrepresent the story, because the vector that the global corporatist media is seeking, the vector they're seeking to damage Farage's chances of becoming prime minister, is to use the vector that Nigel Farage is a racist. And they want you to believe he's a racist so that the public don't vote for him, because the great British public doesn't like racism. Surprise, surprise, we fought Hitler in World War II. We are not a racist country. We sacrificed thousands upon thousands of this country's fighting age males to defeat the ideology of racism. It's not a surprise the country doesn't like racism. We were literally in a world war against its systemic version. And so the corporate media, the globalist warmongering media, which, by the way, in Ukraine is funding and backing militarily the neo-Nazi racists known as the Azov Brigade, they want you to believe Farage is the racist. But the presence of Zahawi, the presence of Layla Cunningham, the presence of Zia Yusuf, because, of course, the Muslim question matters, the liberal corporate media's vector of attack is there's no greater sin of racism than against the Muslim brown person, because they're the biggest victim. And so, almost in answer, poetically, Farage's most prominent figures of late, such as Zia Yusuf, chairman of the party, Layla, now the candidate for Mayor of London for Reform Party, and the highest profile defector, Nadhim Zahawi, have been British Muslims, almost poetically in reply to the allegation that somehow Farage and the Reform Party are racist, and more so the worst type of racism, which is anti-Muslim racism, or so-called Islamophobia. That is the best answer. Now, if you keep in mind that it's the corporate media's vector and has long been their desire to attack Farage using this vector, that he's a racist, keeping in mind that the globalists who fund and found the corporate media are the same globalists that actually militarily funded the neo-Nazi Azov Brigade in Ukraine. They're the ones supporting the racists. Keep all that in mind, and then understand that when the Rupert Lowe's and the Tommy Robinsons and the Lawrence Foxes and the Dan Wootons and the Ben Habibs and the UNN and all of these online presences attack Farage over clips like this, remember something, that the only thing it achieves is in undermining the person that isn't from that system that wanted you to militarily fund and back the actual racists in the war in Ukraine, the neo-Nazi Azov battalion. Because Farage, again, has been on record, on GB News, we've published it many times here on Radical Media, saying that the war in Ukraine needs to come to an end and that people need to listen to Trump's negotiated solution in that regard. And so, again, that's where racism matters, when you're waving your Ukrainian flag, funding actual neo-Nazi battalions for a war you're telling us was for liberty. That's when racism matters. In that way, Farage is not a racist. In that way, of course, Zahawi is correct, that actually patriotism, stopping immigration, these are policy positions. They're not racist positions to hold. And in other words, Farage has won the argument on that front. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That's the only response there. Farage has won the argument. They can no longer come at him, which was their plan all along, as being a racist. And so those, again, who are upset at this development should question as to whether or not they seek to undermine Farage's chances of becoming prime minister. Of course, they've told us they already do, so that wouldn't be a surprise to us. And that's what that Elon Musk rebellion against Trump when he was still in the Trump administration, and at the same time against Farage, that's what it was all about. They are seeking to undermine Trump for the midterms in the US and undermine Farage for the local elections coming up. The long game in the US, of course, is they wish to prepare Peter Thiel to replace Trump, especially if he were to stand down after this term. And here, of course, they're doing everything possible to undermine Farage's bid to become prime minister. It will not succeed. Now, moving on. That was on the racism topic. We're going to carry on because, of course, there are multiple objections that have arisen over this move. And now we can see, as the Times reports, 13th of January, we're going to address you a bit about the terrorism topic, because keep in mind, it was related to the racism stroke Islamophobia topic. And here you see Zahawi quoted in the Times, giving you his stance on the subject of terrorism. He said that's Zahawi, he also expressed concern that, quote unquote, political Islam had become a sickness deep in the heart of Britain. Some of its biggest victims of these Muslim Brotherhood fanatics may be the millions of moderate, decent, patriotic British Muslims, and they may be, as we have seen, Britain's Jewish community too, he said. Zahawi follows other conservative defectors, such as Danny Kruger, a sitting MP who defected in September last year, and Nadhim, a former Tory culture secretary. Now, we mentioned to you now this point about Zahawi agreeing that the Muslim Brotherhood, the Islamist organization, the Muslim Brotherhood, is problematic and their presence in the West is not helpful. Because in that press conference you just saw, in response to the question about racism, Farage also raised the question of Iran. Now, Iran right now is facing the Iranian theocratic regime comprised of, make no mistake, child-abusing, God-using theocrat mullahs who are oppressing their own population. That regime, it used to be politically incorrect to criticize politicized Islam that we call Islamism, the desire to impose any one version of Islam over society, not the religion of Islam. Nadhim Zahawi, being an Iraqi-born British Muslim, Kurdish origin, understands this intuitively, instinctively. He doesn't need to be taught stuff like this. And so what used to be politically incorrect, take it from me, having founded the world's first counter-extremism organization, Quilliam, and having been roundly cancelled second time, and this is probably the third time the world tried to cancel me. The second time was over the extremism debate. Having been roundly cancelled on that extremism debate for having the tenacity and audacity to openly challenge Islamism, we can tell you how far the needle has moved on that front. And Farage has never been one to back down on speaking out against extremism. And you saw him there speaking about the Iranian theocratic regime. Zahawi backed it in his comments, again, demonstrating he's not on the globalist warmongering side. Now, again, critics will wonder, well, if you're criticizing the Iranian regime, does that not make you, Majid and Farage and others, on the globalist side of this because Trump is going to go to war with Iran? No, he is not. That's the point here. You can at once be against the Iranian theocracy, call it out, not be politically correct about it, not say that it's okay because they're brown people that they force women to cover and legally believe in things such as underage marriage being permissible because they believe, for strange reasons, that a Bedouin practice before customary law became canonized law is what we should literally copy today. No, of course you should criticize these things. And the UK grooming gang scandal is a case in point. Farage has been very open on this stuff. So when you look at the Iranian theocracy and when you understand that it used to be taboo to criticize political policy positions that shrouded themselves in the name of being brown and being Muslim, and Farage has long been against that taboo, and criticizing the Iranian theocracy isn't the same as suggesting we're going to go to war to try and help the Iranian people challenge their own system. And then you understand that Trump has already announced that he will enter into negotiations with the Iranian regime, even if he does launch strikes against them. Those strikes will be symbolic, but Trump will not invade Iran. It's as simple as that. So far as Trump won't invade Iran, it's perfectly legitimate for Farage to be critical of the Iranian theocracy and say he believes it needs to end. Of course, who doesn't believe that theocracies need to come to an end in 2026? If you didn't believe that theocracies need to be abolished in 2026, there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with the way you process life. And that means we've got a problem with you too. So of course, it's fine to say openly that the Iranian regime needs to end. Absolutely it is, because it does need to end. They are, as we said, and we'll say it again, a bunch of child-abusing, God-using theocrats who are living in the medieval times. and think that they have authority and integrity to speak and command the Persian people because they are abusing the religion of Islam in what they invented. It's man-made. It's called Shiite Islamism as opposed to Sunni Islamism or Al-Qaeda. The difference is Al-Qaeda never came to power. These Muppets got into power in Iran. Shiite Islamism was invented by Khomeini. They even called it something in Persian. They called it Vilayat al-Faqih, the guardianship of the jurists. It was a new theory that Khomeini invented to justify coming to power in 1979 when he did. Because, importantly, before he invented the theory of Vilayat al-Faqih, or the guardianship of the jurists, there was no such thing as Shia Islamism, and the Shiite community, which is a minority, 20% of the world's Muslims, believed that nobody had the authority to rule on God's behalf until the Messiah, the awaited return of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, who will rule in God's name. Until the return of the Messiah, nobody has the right to claim to rule in God's name. That is Orthodox traditional Shia belief. If you go to Iraq and meet Sistani, the Ayatollah in Iraq, that's what he believes. It's why he's not political, because all Orthodox Shia Muslims believed that nobody could claim to rule in God's name, that they were religiously mandated to secular rule until the return of the Messiah. It's precisely that traditional Orthodox Shia belief that Khomeini intervened in and innovated in by creating Shiite Islamism in the form of the Vilayat al-Faqih, or the guardianship of the jurists doctrine. Vilayat al-Faqih, or the guardianship of the jurists, is a doctrine Khomeini invented to justify, as it says, the name is on the tin, the jurists, the clerics, the mullahs, guarding the rule until the Mahdi comes, which is why they were then theoretically able to justify getting into the position of power as they did in the Iranian Revolution. Therefore, with that context provided to you, you'll understand it is absolutely not Islamophobic to be opposed to the Iranian theocracy. And anybody that supports a theocracy, as we said earlier, should be very clear, it should be very clear that they have got issues in 2026. Moving on, that's that one out of the way. Moving on to because that was in case people are suggesting somehow Nigel Farage is now a warmongering neocon who wants to invade Iran. No one is invading Iran, folks. Calling for the end of the Iranian regime is not the same as saying military, let's invade Iran. Even Trump's not going to invade Iran. Now we're going to get to some of the backlash reactions that you've seen here. So one of them is the question: how many Tories is too many for the Reform Party? You can see that on your screens now, being reported by Coffee House, the Spectator's Coffee House. And it says, how many Tories is too many? That's the question that Westminster is asking after the unveiling of Reform's latest defector. Nadhim Zahawi, Boris Johnson's brief-lived Chancellor of the Exchequer, is Nigel Farage's latest recruit. He told journalists that the UK has reached a dark and dangerous moment. Let's just play that for you from the Spectator.
I know this may come as a surprise to my old party and to many Westminster watchers, but it really shouldn't. And it certainly won't come as a shock to the tens of millions of hard-working, patriotic, decent people up and down our wonderful United Kingdom, from the Highlands of Scotland to the bottom of Cornwall, from rural Wales to the beating heart of London. We can all see.
Now, what you see there is, of course, Zahawi pointing to exactly what all of us feel, and that is the problem with the country not really making any progress in anything. Nothing works anymore. Nothing does what it says it's meant to do. Everyone's poor. No one's happy. And as he said in that press conference, outside the let's say the square mile of the city where they've never been richer, everyone else is angry at the state of affairs. Zahawi's tapping into that. Why? Because he's the one who's changed. He's joined Reform. Let's say changed. The point is, he's changed policy positions. He's joined Reform. And so that's the rhetoric he's now going to have to adopt. So when they ask how many Tories is too many, the answer to that question is, well, if they adopt the message that Farage has been standing on for decades, then they're welcome, just like Labour defectors would be welcome, and others would also be welcome. Let's not forget, Liz Truss herself used to be a Lib Dem and then became a Conservative Prime Minister. So why shouldn't Conservatives defect to join Reform if Liberals can defect to join the Tories and even become their Prime Minister, as Liz Truss did? of course, it's perfectly acceptable for the Reform Party to accept that. Now, here's Rupert Lowe's reaction, an actual defector from Reform, but a one-man band. And this is what he said immediately. Farage has made an enormous mistake welcoming Nadhim Zahawi into Reform. This is not the change the British people want. We need to utterly decimate the British establishment, not become it. Now, the issue here, which we want to make very clear, not necessarily to Rupert Lowe, because Rupert's not about to change his position, because, of course, it's evident that his position is already entrenched, but also wrong. Rupert's not about to change his position, but anyone that may be tempted to listen to the stuff that comes out of Rupert's mouth, not least his backing of Tommy Robinson, who went online and doused fuel onto the flames of the national riots after incorrectly identifying that the Southport attacker that murdered those innocent children in the machete attack was a Muslim. And then, of course, was put into jail subsequently, not for that, for something else, which was more related to a breach of court order by a judge, but nevertheless was held in solitary confinement for a period of time to calm down. Now, Rupert Lowe should understand that the desire isn't to burn this country down. No patriot wants to burn this country down. No patriot in America that backed MAGA wants to burn America down. The desire isn't to burn the establishment down. It's to grab them by the collar and steer them in the right direction by using a combination of carrot and stick. That's what change makers do. That's how change occurs. There's always a carrot, there's always a stick, because you're trying to influence people, not destroy people, not to decimate them and ruin them, and then dance in the ashes after the flames have gone out. Why? Because you believe in this country. You're trying to pick it up, not knock it down, Mr. Lowe. And if you don't understand that picking it up means having broad enough shoulders to build a broad enough church so that you can teamwork, then of course, good luck to you building a national infrastructure across the country's every single constituency in the country and representing enough MPs in Parliament that you could one day become Prime Minister. Go for it, Mr. Lowe. See how far you get. But clearly, Ben Habib's got no chance, and nor has Tommy Robinson of doing, or Stephen Yaxley Lennon, as is his real name, of doing any such thing. And here's another black pillar, Dan Wootton, who's these days seems to constantly be complaining about the state of affairs, again, as if they've never had to build a national coalition to try and govern. Here is, we'll read it for you. It should perhaps be on your screens. Let's see if we can get that back on your screens for you. Yep, there we are. It should be large. There's Dan Wootton's remarks. We're going to read that for you now. Another high-profile Muslim and ex-Boris Wave Tory, Nadhim Zahawi, defects to Reform UK. Please do not tell me this is not deliberate now. Zahawi was also chief vaccine pusher. In July 2022, Farage slammed Zahawi to me on GB News for climbing the greasy pole and lacking principles. And one more we're going to read, and that's from online commentator Unity News Network. Zahawi is a criminal. He comes from a long family of criminals. Looks like Farage has basically given up by allowing these leeches and parasites to get involved. Then they posted a video of Nadhim Zahawi saying vulnerable children will be offered the COVID vaccines, and of course his record on the coronavirus. And here's another black pillar, David Icke. David Icke criticizing Farage. Nadhim Zahawi, former chairman of cult operation Les Circle, also Pinay Circle, and the fake vaccine promoting minister during COVID, has defected to Reform. Farage wanted Tony Blair to oversee the fake vaccine rollout, so Zahawi is in the right place. The idea that Farage and Reform are the answer to the deep state cult tyranny is a joke. Labour and Conservative are a busted flush, and so another party was needed to keep you believing that politics is the answer to anything. Different rhetoric, same masters. And finally, you can see, of course, Tommy Robinson. Before we get to Tommy Robinson, we'll just comment a bit on what you've seen so far. It is important, by the way, that David Icke should be aware that he now sits in the Tommy Robinson camp, being opposed to Nigel Farage's recent move here and multiple other recent moves. And that matters. Why? Because Of course, the point we've been making over the course of this stream is if you're not a change maker, if you're not in this game to make things better, and the only thing you ever do is complain, then are you really, what is your real game? We put it to everybody that there are many agents of chaos or chaos agents whose sole purpose is to divide us by constantly whinging and complaining so that we can be conquered, true to the policy of divide and conquer. And you've got to be able to identify whose interests it is that the constant negativity and whinging prevails, because, of course, what does that result in? It results in us being divided. And it's with that note that, talking of divide and conquer and our response to the permanent whinger, grumpy David Icke, we're going to move to Tommy Robinson. Mr. Icke stands in the same camp as Tommy Robinson in opposing this move. Here is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, Tommy Robinson's remarks. With recent news of Nadhim Zahawi's appointment at Reform, he says, let's see if we can get that on your screens for you. There we are. With recent news of Nadhim Zahawi's appointment at Reform, it's clear that this party is needed now more than ever, that meaning the Advance UK party of Tommy Robinson's. A pro-lockdown, pro-force vaccine mandate Muslim politician, born in Iraq, should not be part of any party that wants to put British people first. The only party which truly cares about the country is Advance UK, according to Tommy Robinson. Now, it's important there, you just saw that, of course, Robinson has raised the question of Reform allowing Muslims in. Again, that's part of the divide and conquer strategy. It's what people like David Icke should realize. By the way, David, I know you say, oh, I'm not anti-Muslim or racist, and I hate Tommy Robinson as well. The fact is, mate, you have absolutely no practical suggestion for what should happen next, other than let's all turn into Grumpy from the Seven Dwarfs and whinge about absolutely everything while talking about literal lizards and not telling anyone who they should vote for to make the country better. The country's not going to get better tomorrow if we suddenly believe that all of them running it are actual literal lizards. There needs to be steps towards change, Mr. Icke. What is your manifesto for change other than saying what Tommy Robinson is saying these days? So on the topic of Zahawi being Muslim, David Bull, the current chair of the Reform Party, was asked that. Talk TV put up this interview with him on that, and a caller asked him that question. This is what he had to say.
Michael on Nadhim, good morning.
Morning, Jez. Great show. It's Michael from Corby here. Just dropping a note in on the point of Tories defecting to Reform. Reform was supposed to be a party of British people, for the British people, putting our needs first. They've imported every Muslim from the Tory party whose only interest is the Muslim community. Therefore, Reform will be no better than the Tories or Labour, and they won't get my vote. We need a party that's going to put British people first for once. Have a great one, mate. Thank you.
Can I just make the point? They are British. So Zia is British. Layla is British. Nadhim is British. So I don't buy that in any sense. Look, the whole point is that anyone who comes to our party has to subscribe to our values. If they don't believe, and if they're not on the same page as me and Nigel and the rest of us, then they are not welcome in the party. And it's simple as that.
There you go. It's pretty much what we've been saying. They are the ones joining Reform. Reform is not joining them. And if you don't believe Reform has been vocal enough on certain topics, well, that's what this stream is about. We're about to show you, in fact, it's the opposite. So what matters, as we say here on your screens, what matters is the signal, not the noise. Farage opposed this stuff when it mattered. Look, here he is opposing Zahawi when it mattered. At the time that Zahawi was Chancellor of the Exchequer and just quit the Boris Johnson's government, here is Farage opposing Zahawi when it mattered. So the real question is, clearly Zahawi's the one who's forgiven Farage, not the other way around.
A week that Zahawi would be fired, and sure enough, 9 o'clock Sunday morning, finally Sunak does it. Doesn't say much about Zahawi's affairs. I mean, hey, if you're Chancellor of the Exchequer and you have to pay money to the taxman, it's not a good look. But it says even more about Sunak's leadership. The man, I'm going to tell you, he is not a leader. Not that I think actually Keir Starmer is either. One thing for certain, the Tories are not fit to govern. This episode proves that. I don't think...
There you go. it mattered then to oppose Zahawi when the Tories were in government, and Farage did. Farage isn't the one that now has joined Zahawi. Zahawi has joined Farage. Again, opposing stuff when it mattered. Here is the question around vaccines, and we're going to demonstrate to you, since we've already raised it, what Farage said at the time. Well, here is a post of Farage, it's on Twitter, in fact, from 2 years ago, making very clear that he's linking excess deaths to the vaccine due to the report that emerged in The Telegraph 2 years ago. Today, The Telegraph reported COVID vaccines may have helped fuel rise in excess deaths. At last, others are waking up to the need for a full immediate inquiry into vaccine harms. And we're going to play you a video of him saying so on national television, which is on your screens now.
Number of people, young men in particular, who've developed myocarditis and other heart conditions. I'm not getting conspiratorial about this, but let's have it out in the open. But I want to know as well why we were lied to. I want to know why they were trying to vaccinate kids of primary school age when COVID posed almost no threat to them whatsoever. And, you know, Boris Johnson and his government put in place an absolutely draconian system, not just of lockdowns, but of £500 million of taxpayers' money spent on newspaper wraparounds, on adverts. Remember, can you look into his eyes? If you don't take the vaccine, you'll kill your grandparents. It all turned out to be completely untrue. They do seem to be.
Now, when you see that, remember something, folks. Remember something. That is the only national leader of any national party that has come out on national television and linked the vaccines to deaths, opposed all the mandates and said they were lying to us, and then opposed explicitly the vaccinating of children, which was what Nadhim Zahawi's job was as vaccines minister. So who's joined who? Did Zahawi join Reform, or did Reform join Zahawi? And that's the point we're asking you to remember. Farage hasn't retracted those comments. And by the way, once you learn this stuff, you can't unlearn it. The public cannot unlearn what they now know about vaccine harms and myocarditis and all of the other problems they caused. So what is more likely? Is it that Reform has suddenly unlearned all of this stuff? Then the rank and file of the Reform Party that make its beating heart and pulse have suddenly forgotten everything they learned over the last 6 years? Or do you think Zahawi is the one that's going to quietly climb down from that position and maybe even be forced to address his climb down in any future given moment if you, the Reform rank and file, remain steadfast on what you know to be the truth? What's more likely to happen? The only reason that wouldn't happen is if you back down. But remember, you can stand firm on your principles, never compromising, never retreating, and never surrendering, while being welcoming of those who give lip service to actually now agreeing with your principles. You don't have to shun them and disbelieve them and suspect them on day one. You can give them that leeway to listen to your arguments through civil conversation. And eventually, the hope is that people change. And of course, people do change. That's why we're in this business. It's not to shut people down. It's to help them change and move on. And so just to remind everybody, this is a direction of travel that has been in place now for multiple years. We said, as we are putting on your screens now, as far back as the date of this image in 2024, as you can see, hopefully on your screens now, that Nigel Farage there it is. As far back as this image, we said that Farage is going to be Prime Minister. That image on your screens should be dated December 18th, 2024. And here is the post. This was the scene yesterday evening. National security check. Foreign policy check, UK politics check. The great Cardinal Andrew Fox probably agrees with me that Nigel Farage will become Prime Minister sooner than most people think we are coming. All that's happened since then is that the trajectory has moved to a point where formerly national members of the government are seeing the writing on the wall, jumping ship and joining the only game in town, which is Nigel Farage's Reform Party. Why should that surprise anybody? It's always the case. As we said earlier, it's why Farage It's why Farage left UKIP to set up the Brexit Party and then left the Brexit Party to join Reform, because it happened every time he was getting close to achieving his objective. Why should that surprise everybody? And why should you suddenly forget that, of course, the man has experience in each one of those stages in dealing with people that jump ship to try and subvert the party he was currently the head of, in a direction he didn't agree with. And all he did was he left that one, he founded a new one. Then he left that one, he founded a new one, because a man is no stranger to fifth columnist subversionists. The subversives have tried this before. It won't work. And of that, people need to have a bit more faith in understanding that people aren't stupid. We've seen this all before. We know what people try and do to subvert and to divert. Nothing can change what is coming. And to conclude on that note, we're going to just make it very clear to everybody exactly what the trajectory is and shall remain from about 3 or 4 headlines, just to end on this note. There is the pulse. It's very clear. It is in no doubt the Reform Party now, in a feat that was previously deemed impossible and, in fact, was mocked. Here are the polls from the Times of London making it very clear to you that Reform is in the lead comfortably, and that if a general election were called tomorrow, there is no doubt that Nigel Farage would end up winning a majority in Parliament. That is on your screens. You can see that's from today in the Times, and they're sitting there at 28%. By the way, the 30% threshold is what matters. They are right next to it. They are going to take over. And of course, people will jump ship. And the trajectory has always been there. Here from the 15th of September, the Times said Tories face more defections after Danny Kruger MP joins Reform. And of course, it was predicted back in September they would face more defections, as that headline tells you right there. And then, of course, they did get more. From the 6th of December, Reform gains a Tory defection. A First Lord for the House of Lords joins Reform. And now, of course, moving on, you see, since Zahawi's, just before Zahawi's defection on the 12th of December, Reform UK, according to the Times, is now the UK's largest party. That is precisely that we have been telling you here at Radical Media for over 2 years is what was going to happen. It has now happened. Now you're here. Now you've got everything you worked so hard for over the last 2 years to achieve, which is to take outsider views that were not belonging in the British establishment, views that were critical of globalism and the globalist bureaucracy that was steering us in the wrong direction. You are now on the precipice of taking over. Do not sabotage your own success by being blackpilling, doom-mongering pessimists who whinge about every success and cannot recognize it for what it is, which is indeed a success. That's what's happened. What's happened is that people that used to be, during the COVID lockdowns, perhaps the most powerful man in the country when it came to injecting you against your wishes with a medically experimental concoction, such as Nadhim Zahawi, who was vaccines minister, making you do all that, even he has had to bend the knee and join the Reform Party under Nigel Farage's leadership, who we just showed you went on national television as the leader of a national party and linked the COVID so-called vaccine to deaths and to myocarditis, and then opposed all the other mandates as well. You've already won, folks. Your job's done. The only thing that can stop you winning now is if you don't believe that you deserve this success and you sabotage it by listening to the black pillars. Back to how we began. Jesus Christ brought light. He didn't bring darkness. May Allah guide us all to his complete message. You've been listening to the Warrior Creed live stream with me, the Radical, Majid Nawaz. That's all for this week. We encourage everybody to go to Radical Media on majidnawaz.substack.com. Subscribe there. Without your paying subscriptions, we cannot do this work. And the podcast version of the stream will be offered to all our premium subscribers there on Radical Media. And of course, so will all the other behind the paywall content, such as early event invites and other early announcements. Until next time, this has been the Warrior Creed livestream with me, the Radical, Majid Nawaz.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street fight